Hello and welcome back to the Pet Business Wellbeing podcast with me, Nathan Dunleavy. This is the podcast where we talk about the realities of running a pet business, the highs, the challenges, and most importantly, how to look after your well-being while you do it. Because running a business should support your life, not consume it. Katrina Bayliss, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hello, thank you for having me on. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you. I'm doing really well. So I'm excited to get
Brilliant. So we've just had a power cut at Katrina's, so we're hoping
fingers
we're
crossed.
going to get through this episode. I'm currently holding a dog, so I've got my SA dog in my lap, and because he's in my lap, this one then wants to get up, and he's being grumpy. So yeah, all hell may break loose. But then that's the realities of being a business owner with multiple dogs.
This is it.
I'm so excited to be chatting to you today. I came onto your podcast and that episode went live this week. And yeah, I love chatting to you then. But we're going to be sort of talking a bit more sort of niching down and talking all about neurodivergence today, neurodivergent pet business owners. It's going to be a really interesting subject. So I'm really glad you're here. So first of all, please could you tell us, for those listeners or viewers, if they don't know you, who you are and what it is you do?
Thank you. So I'm Katrina Bayliss, otherwise known as a Neurodivergent Dog Coach. So I kind of have two sides to the business. So I help dog trainers and professionals work in a way that suits their brains so they can achieve success without compromising their needs and reducing overwhelm, basically. Then the other side of my business, I work as a business consultant, helping dog professionals to make their services more inclusive so that everybody benefits, the business, the clients, and the dogs in their care. So in a nutshell, that's what I do.
Love it, and I love the word business consultant.
That's it.
That's a good one.
I think it's because it's a more consultancy what I do for neurotypical basically dog businesses. It may not know about being neuro-inclusive, so it's kind of like consultancy work more so than coaching or mentoring, because they don't need that side of it. They just need to be told what to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking all about sort of neurodivergence today, and obviously neurodivergent pet business owners. So for anyone who's listening who may be neurodivergent themselves, or they maybe start to wonder that they might be,
Right.
please would you share a little bit about your own journey, the work you do supporting neurodivergent pet professionals, and why this kind of support feels more important than ever in our industry right now.
So my story, I'll try and keep a brief version of it. So basically I started over 11 years ago, and I originally got a dog and came into the industry. I didn't have any plans to be a dog trainer or anything like that. I basically got a dog to help me because I was going through a really bad period of anxiety where I didn't want to leave the house on my own. I was okay with my husband, with my kids, but on my own, I was just having really bad panic attacks and stuff, couldn't do a food shop. So I was like, always wanted a dog from knee high to a grasshopper kind of thing. Researched it, got Milo, and then I blame him for everything. So he got me out of the house, started dog walking, made some dog walking friends, and then started dog walking professionally, volunteered at a rescue. And then because I now know, because of my neurodivergence, kind of went all in and hyper-fixated and hyper-focused on his behaviour and why he was, he's a bit cheeky, he's Cocker Spaniel, they're all a bit crazy. But when I was going to dog training lessons, I wasn't getting the information in a way that my brain could understand. So I was going home and researching it because I felt like a failure. So he was being naughty and running off, and they just stand there and say, when you get your dog back, we'll try again. And I was like, well, you're not telling me why he's doing it so I can fix it. And I don't know how to get my dog back. So I kind of just went all in and re-qualified and did dog training qualification after dog training qualification. And then got a hobby with him, started agility, and it kind of all went from there, really. And then fast forward to what I do now, and I was diagnosed about 2 or 3 years ago as neurodivergent. And then because all in my career, I've started focusing on anxiety because that's what I had to deal with, me being anxious, competing in agility and all that kind of thing, which is relatively normal in that sport. So I kind of thought it was that. I thought it was an anxiety thing. And then when I got diagnosed, I was like, oh, and all these light bulbs started, popping off. And I was like, oh, this is why. And then I realised just how the dog industry and most dog professionals, it isn't set up for neurodivergent people. And I honestly believe that if things were different for me back then, I probably wouldn't have been a trainer. I probably wouldn't have had the career that I have now. But what I would have had is I've been able to go to class and not feel like a failure. And I was able to give my dog the care that he needs, really. So that's a very brief version of why I'm doing what I'm doing now. But in terms of why it matters now in our industry more than anything is because I think the industry as a whole is like facing a lot of burnout. I think there's a lot of pressures as dog trainers and dog professionals. And there's such a
Mm.
high emotional labor to the work that we do because we tend to be caring professionals. We want to help the dogs and things. And I also think that burnout is massive. And so when you go through burnout, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, something has to give and something has to stop. And that's kind of what happened to me. I was teaching agility behavior, agility classes, and I was trying to juggle all of the plates and spin all the plates, sorry. And it just, something had to give because I was burning out. And the more I looked into my neurodivergence, the more I was like, oh, hold on a minute. This is so much of a crossover. And the work I did previous to becoming a dog trainer is all in counselling and psychology. So I've kind of over the years
Oh,
adapted everything from there and amalgamated it into everything I do now. Plus, before that, when I left school, I was doing business coaching, business qualification. So I've kind of gone on this massive journey of like to where I am now, but everything's kind of fell into place, if that makes sense.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love a bit of a journey in someone's story. So thanks for sharing. So forgive my ignorance then. Neurotypical, is that people that aren't
Yes. Yeah.
neurodivergent?
Yeah. So anybody
Right, okay.
I don't like using the word normal because I don't think there is any normal. So basically people that aren't
Oh,
divergent.
no, there isn't. Yeah, normal's boring anyway.
Definitely.
So
Definitely.
I'm of that view. Who wants to be
It is.
normal? No such thing as normal. We've all got our individualities and quirks and uniqueness. Right. So yeah, it's so fascinating. And also you wrote a book, didn't you? You're a published author.
Yes.
So your book your book's called Milo,
Like
isn't
Milo
it?
the dog
Or
that gave me
something
it
along those
all. It
lines.
is a thing. I've got it here actually. Let me do a little picture up. That's basically telling me
Yeah.
it's all about the story
Yeah.
of how I started doing what I was doing, basically, and how he got me into all of this, basically.
Mm. Yeah, and I've got your book as well. I haven't read it yet. I've got loads to read, but it's definitely one that I want to read. And I love that you've got a dog called Milo because I've got a dog called Milo, and he saved me, my
I really
Milo.
know.
I was living up north and moved back down to Southampton where I'm originally from. But we'd had two Chihuahuas, and then we got Milo, and I was going through some really bad mental health struggles at the time. And we got Milo, and he sort of saved me. So
Amazing.
yeah, I love that you've got a Milo too. Dogs have got a lot to answer for, haven't they?
Mhm.
Because I set up my dog walking business 8 years ago, and then I trained as a dog trainer and did every course going, and
Mhm.
we'll come on to that. And then my own dog, the one that sat on my lap's got separation anxiety. So then I trained as a certified behavior consultant that specialized in SA,
Amazing.
and then helping all the dogs that have got SA in there and their caregivers. So yeah, I feel dogs have got a lot to answer for.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And it's interesting
Um,
talking to people because they all have, well, any dog professional you talk to, they all have their own story and a dog that started it all off for them. So, it's fun.
yeah, and most dog professionals I've spoken to, particularly on my other podcast, the Yappy
Yeah,
Hour, they all got into the dog industry or training because of their own dog.
yeah, that's it. They say, don't they? They say you
So
don't get
we're
the dog you want,
seeing
you get
more.
the dog you need.
Well, yes, exactly. And I love that. So we are seeing more and more pet pros openly identify as neurodivergent.
Mhm.
Why do you think that is? And where do you feel the biggest gap in support will sit?
So I think what it is now is I think it's not, there's all this thing in the media, isn't there, like a negative association to it, that people are suddenly becoming neurodivergent and stuff. And I don't think it's that. I think they just finally recognise it in themselves because there's more awareness
Mm,
now. So there's better language out there. There's more awareness, whether that is positive or negative through the media, social media. There is just more talk about it now. So people
mm,
are identifying pulsating. So with that comes
mm,
people, seeing themselves online. So they might see something online that someone else is talking, because there is a lot more, thankfully, people talking about it now, and they're like recognizing and thinking, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'm going to explore that a little bit more. I also, going back to the burnout thing, I think burnout with the industry that we're in, it forces reflection. So it means that you have to slow down and you change something, because you can't go on like that, unfortunately. And I think there's safer conversations as well. So I
Mm.
think there is spaces now online and things where we can open up and be ourselves, and just be ourselves, really, rather than having to mask and to pretend we've got to fit in this kind of mold. So when it comes to the gap, I feel
Mm.
like is my whole bugbear with it all, and the reason I do the work that I do now is because that's my main thing, that the dog industry seems to be so far behind when it comes to comparing it to other industries, when it comes to just not only accepting neurodivergence, but also making things more neurodivergent friendly. So it's the gaps are, I'd say, there's support that tries to fix the person rather than the problem. So I think there's a lot of, you know, a lot of the, not blame. I don't really want to use the word blame, but it's that kind of like the person takes the blame, so to speak, rather than actually looking at the surroundings and looking at the environment that they're in, or they're having to go in. For example, when I was dog training, I was feeling like a completely different person. Even as recent as last year, when I was going to certain agility groups and stuff, I was made not made to feel a certain way, but I was feeling a certain way just because that's the way things have always been done. And if you don't fit in that mold, it tends to be you that tends to quietly, sleek off and just don't bother using them services. So one of the things I talk about all the time is, as professionals, we kind of knock internet training and stuff like that. But the thing is, for me, if your services aren't set up for your neurodivergent clients, they're not going to be the ones that openly speak out and are really loud and confident. Say, excuse me, I want this or I need this. They're just going to quietly
Mm.
feel bad in themselves, probably feel like they're doing something wrong and they're the problem. Then they're going to go away, but they're still going to need that dog training help. And the only way that they can get that, they probably won't go to another trainer if they've had a bad experience. And I don't mean a bad experience as in the trainer shouted at them or anything like that, just the way that they're made to feel. They're going to go onto the internet. And we all know what happens when we go onto the internet. It's not always good advice. So I think that's the thing. There's too much of an emphasis on it's the person that's the problem rather than the actual environment and things. Lack of practical
Mm.
accommodations as well. So again, going back to the way that traditional dog training and dog professionals are set up, because we've always done that, and trying to change something in an industry that's so regimented in how we do things can be quite difficult. So from an agility background, I did that a little bit, but it's quite hard to change a whole industry on your own. So I think
Mm.
that's people do what's familiar and things like that. So I think there's a lot of shame as well. So in wanting things or needing things to be done differently. So I think people won't speak up. Like I was mentioning before, we tend to be the quiet ones that just tend to suffer in silence. And I did for quite a few years. And of course, we naturally think the problem is us. So it's just not for us, and
Mm.
people are leaving the industry or leaving dog training or whatever it might be. And I think there's a little bit more
Mm.
awareness now, but I think when it comes to dog training and dog services, there's not enough understanding and awareness about what neurodivergent people actually need. And that's no fault of anybody. It's just because the dog industry has just always been this way. And if we've always done something this way and it's working and people are making money, why would they change it unless they had a need themselves? And I think, yeah, I think
Mhm.
they're kind of the main problems and gaps that I see.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't think it's just in the pet industry. Like you
Mhm.
say, we are seeing a lot more people being diagnosed with neurodivergence,
Mhm.
ADHD, autism. But I think the press has got a lot to answer for, because they do create
Mhm.
and spin a negative narrative, like, oh, you know, everyone's being diagnosed ADHD,
Yeah.
everyone's ADHD. But I think it's a case that they've either been misdiagnosed for so long
Mhm.
as having just anxiety, or they might be like deemed a problem child in inverted commas when they were at
Mhm.
school. I just think like now people are finally getting the recognition and the support that they need, but the press don't help the situation. So I don't think it's just pet pros. I think we're seeing it across the board, aren't we?
Yeah, and I think the press doesn't help, but I think I think if you, the only thing I can really compare it to is my husband works in aerospace, so he works in aerospace
Mm.
in a factory basically, and comparing it to them, the work that they do and the amount of awareness, like they'll have little posters on toilet doors and things, and they'll have meetings about it and helplines they can go to for advice and stuff. So, like comparing it to other industries like that, corporate, so to speak, there seems to be a lot more corporate organizations now that are making allowances and adaptations for it. I don't think the press helps
Mm.
at all because it always puts a negative spin on things. But I think that's what they're there to do, isn't it? They want to create drama and create, this big drama so people get involved with it. So it doesn't help. But there was a saying, I don't know who said this saying, but somebody said something about something along the lines of they discovered that it wasn't that there was more stars in the universe or something until they only discovered them when they invented telescopes. So there was always there, but because they'd invented telescopes, they could just suddenly see more. And I think that's very similar to neurodivergence as well. You know, we've always been around and been part of it. We used to describe it differently, didn't we? We always used to think, right, we've got a quirky uncle or someone, that dresses a bit differently,
Yeah.
or that, at the Christmas party that behaves a bit differently. And they just used to get labelled as quirky. But looking back,
Mm.
it probably was neurodivergence and there just wasn't that awareness there. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Mm. Why do you think then that the press do make a negative thing out of it? Is it just to create drama because they're almost like singling this group out or isolating them, and that's not a very nice space to be in, is
Yeah,
it?
I think it is. I think it sells, doesn't it? I think when anything negative kind of creates more of an army of people to get behind. It's like you'll see it on social media as well. It only takes one person to start moaning about something, and then a load of other people jump on a bandwagon because as humans, that's what we tend to do. We like to
Mhm.
go in groups and crowds, and there's all kinds of different psychology about it. But yeah, I think it is just to create that friction and drama and all of those things. But I think as well, though, I think there is quite a lot of people advocating for it and quite a lot of people trying to speak up for it. But it's like anything, we're by the nature of neurodivergent people, we're not typically ones to shout and be dead confident and loud. So I think if you're facing struggles anyway, so if you are going through burnout or you are overwhelmed or you've got all of these things going off in your life, sometimes you don't have the energy or capacity to fight the fight, so to speak. So it's easier just to go into yourself. And it's amazing, really, since I started doing the work that I do, just the amount of people that, just because I've got a bigger mouth nowadays, I've done the work, I've done the mindset work, I don't mind talking about things, that have either jumped on my posts or have come into my inbox or emailed me and gone, oh, I'm so glad you've talked about that because I was feeling like that and I thought I was on my own. So I think the more people that do
Mm.
speak about it positively, the more it encourages other people to come out and say, yes, me too. And my whole thing about it is I don't want anybody. I've not had the best time in the dog industry because of all of this and other things. And I don't want anybody to feel, whether in the dog industry or not, I don't want anyone to feel like I did because it was quite isolating, like you felt on your own. You didn't feel part of anything, especially coming from a sports background. How it tends to happen is, I got in it. I'm not, despite the rosettes, I'm not particularly competitive. I do it because I have a good relationship with my dogs. I always say that, and then there's like all these rosettes behind me, kind of like.
Bloody
I know.
loads.
Well, I always say that the result of the rosettes should be a byproduct of the relationship you create with the dog. And I think what tends to happen in life in general is, as neurodivergent people, my experience of it is because I hyper focused on it and because I learned so much about behavior and the relationship and bringing all the mindset stuff from my counseling psychology background into it, we naturally got good at it because that's what you do. You put the work in. But what happened was I did it by accident, and I talk about it in my book how, I didn't mean to do that, but people started then because of this tall poppy syndrome. When I first started and I wasn't very good at it, they was like, oh, brilliant. And it was really friendly and really, really welcoming and really helpful. So for me, who was going through anxiety and not very confident at all, I was like, oh, brilliant. I finally got some friends, some people who accept me for who I am, kind of thing. And then when I started getting good, those start by accident. I didn't know anything about the grades. The people were saying, "Oh, you'll move up a grade now," and this, that, and the other. I was like, "Oh, okay, fair enough. Best learn a bit of this." But then when I got past a certain point, they just stopped talking to me. Just I'd seen them at the next show, and they just wouldn't speak to me. And I was like, "This is crazy. Like, what on earth have I done?" And I've
I
found that
hate
throughout
that.
my career, the better you get at something, people kind of drop off. And as a neurodivergent person, you wanting to be accepted because you've never been accepted before. So I was like, well, what can I do? What have I done wrong? It's the me problem. And so I did more courses. I tried harder. I was like, well, maybe if I get my dogs to grade 7, then I'll be accepted. Maybe if I do this course and then become part of, what it's like in the dog training world, you get quite, you can get quite clicky, and you get, if you're not careful, you'll get, oh, you need to do this certain course to be accepted, but you're only accepted then by that group of people because the people who have done the other courses think that you should do their courses. And it becomes this crazy like mess of stuff in your head. You're like, well, where can I fit in? Where can I be accepted? And I wasted far too much money just trying to fit in. And it wasn't, luckily
Mhm.
I got the qualifications with it as well. So it did me a favor. But looking back on it, I didn't need to do all that, but it was because of my neurodivergence. I was just desperately wanting to be accepted. And, what is it? I was, I'm pretty okay at what I do as a dog behavior, agility behavior specialist and stuff. But I was never kind of, especially in the agility world, never quite in the right click, if that made sense. And it was really, really difficult to deal with, really. And from a trainer point of view, so the clients that were coming to me, they were like, it was almost like they was training with me in secret because I dealt with agility behavior. It was almost like they didn't want to admit they needed help. But I'm
Mhm.
not high enough up the ranks to be like a top trainer that goes to cross. So I'm not in that, I was like in the middle ground. So when it comes to my neurodivergence, it was, trying to get reviews off people, trying to get them to like just mention you on Facebook and stuff is really difficult because when you see them, you know that you train them every single week, but then they're going to a workshop and training with a top trainer, but they're tagging them all over Facebook. So when you're trying to build a business, you're like, it needs reviews, it needs that kind of thing. And it just kind of led me down this path to like, this is horrendous. And eventually led me to burnout because I had all of that kind of stuff going on. But then also, because I was
Mm.
so into the dog agility behavior, a lot of the people I was training were beginners. And when you're doing beginner agility, there's nothing wrong with it, but they just want to do the course, they just want to do the things. So that side of it was burning me out
Mm.
as well. And it was just that, and that's what kind of forced me to stop and go, do you know what? This is rubbish on all levels. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do now, because there's so many people out there like me that just feel rubbish and they don't really need to. Since doing the work I do now, I've got a lovely community of people and stuff. And it's crazy. Just it's like it's done a 180. But yeah, I went off on a bit of a
Mm.
tangent there, sorry.
No, it's fine. You're clearly very passionate about it all. And we both know that you and I can
Yeah.
talk. So yeah, you're very passionate. So the thing is as well, with labels,
Mhm.
sometimes labels are not always a good thing, are they? Because I'm not a big fan of labels. So how does that fit with you then? Because people being labeled as neurodivergent or having ADHD, is that a good thing then?
Um,
Because normally labels can be a bit bad.
I think the thing I will say is any person with any kind of neurodivergence is not, ADHD and autism are just a tiny percentage of it. There's quite a lot of umbrella terms that come under neurodivergence. And I think even though there are similarities, so like me and the next person, I have both autism and ADHD. But what I have and the symptoms that I experience won't be the same as theirs. And I think it's a little bit like that when it comes to labels and things. So what we try to do when it comes to neurodivergence is just see the individual for who they are, and if they are happy to have this label put on them, then that's fine. And everybody is so individual when it comes to their opinions on it. So we try to use identity, what we call identity first language, which means instead of saying I don't as much as I should do, I'll say I have autism and ADHD because that's just the way my brain works. But for some people, that's quite offensive because they say like, oh, the neurodivergence isn't something they have; it's part of them. So they prefer to use identity first, which is, I am autistic, I am ADHD. But for me, I don't mind that, but again, it's a personal preference. I can do both. It doesn't matter to me. And on a personal level, the labels have kind of helped me to find my community. So I think in that respect, it kind of helps. But then you always get the negative side of things. Like there's a negative side to anything. It's like if you're talking about, I don't know, a reactive dog or something, you label that dog reactive. Is it reactive or is it fearful? I think it's
Mm.
so individual how people see the labels. It's not a kind of a quick, one word kind of answer kind of thing. It's so up to the actual individual.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So it's so funny, right? Because I mean, I've made no secret of my mental health
Mhm,
struggles, and I'm very open, I'm honest, but I'm very sensitive
mhm,
and, wear my heart on my sleeve. But when I did some mentoring last year of Andrew Howe, he made me realize that, they're my superpowers and I shouldn't keep fighting
mhm,
against them. But I've suffered with severe anxiety for over 20 years and over the latter years, like some PTSD and
mhm.
stuff. But I was on someone's podcast and they said to me, "Oh, I think you might have ADHD." And I was like, "What?" And I've never thought about me maybe having it. They were like, "Yeah, because you're always doing all these different things and you're got all these different businesses and you're doing all these courses and then there's something new coming out. I think you've got ADHD." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then because of the way my mind works, I overthink things, I overanalyze. Since that person said that, I haven't been able to stop thinking it. Now, it's not a bad thing if I do have it,
Mhm,
but I've now been looking into it. So, because I mean, it might be that I have that and it's not the severe anxiety that I've been suffering and the PTSD and all the other mental health stuff. It could kind of
mhm,
fall into the umbrella. I do have shiny course syndrome and like I sign up to all these different courses and then I want to make myself the best version I can be. And I always take on a lot, and I like to keep busy.
mhm,
But I think that's from being trauma informed because you like to prove people wrong. You like to be the best version of
mhm,
yourself. So I like to keep busy, but I like structure. I always used to say I'm a typical male Virgo, so I'm a perfectionist. I like things done a certain way.
mhm.
So I'm reeling off all these things. I'm a control freak. So anyway, I've been looking into it, and I've been looking at the right to choose website and I've spoken to my GP and I've got an appointment with my GP actually this coming week and to discuss it all. So I thought, well, there's no harm in having the assessment, is there, and
No,
seeing.
no, no. You can do the little tests online, can't you? So when I went down that road, I
I've
was like,
done that
yeah,
one.
and do loads of different ones, and they all kept coming out that. So I have combined ADHD, so I have both inattentive and the hyperactive. So with that and my autism, it's all a crazy mix that happens in my brain on a daily basis. So yeah, it's super interesting when you go down that rabbit hole of, oh, this is why. And I think it's interesting what you said about the perfectionism as well, because as dog professionals, we tend to do that, don't we? We tend to want everything to be perfect, and it will come from a variety of places, but I think sometimes it comes from a place of us not feeling as confident in our own abilities, and we kind of want everything to be perfect. For me, it did. It was like I need everything to be perfect, then no one can criticize me. And if I'm so perfect at it, they can't pick fault or anything like that. Well, obviously, before I knew, I just thought I was a perfectionist. But then, obviously, knowing what I know now about neurodivergence, it's because of RSD. The rejection sensitivity dysphoria that we have. And
Yes,
studies have shown recently that
I think I got that as well.
yeah, it's really interesting because studies have shown recently that the RSD can affect us as much as a physical pain. So, and it doesn't have to be an actual rejection; it can be a perceived criticism as well. So, if you think about things in like that we go through every day in our industry, there's so much of that. And yeah, so linking it with the perfectionism, it's quite common because we're like, for me, it was like if I get everything perfect, people can't criticize me. People, I can't be the one that's gonna get hurt, so to speak. But yeah, it's all fascinating.
Yeah, well, I do struggle with criticism actually,
Mhm.
and I'm also my own worst critic.
Yeah.
So, and that RSD thing sort of kind of makes sense as well, being sort of emotive and sensitive and
Mhm.
whatever. But no, I haven't really looked into all the different types, but I did do the test and it said comes out with that you might be or something and that you might benefit from
Yeah.
having an assessment. So I thought, well, I'll have a look into it all. So we'll see what happens.
Yes.
So if any dog professionals are
Mhm.
listening, what can they do, or what tips do you have, or like small steps can they take to ensure that they're neurodiversive inclusive?
So I think so from a dog professional's point of view, I just have a massive overhaul of their services and thinking about actually doing as much, number one, doing as much research as you can into neurodivergent, because like I say, one neurodivergent person will be different from another. And there's so many things
Mm,
from a dog training, but let's just go for the dog training perspective because it's easier, that neurodivergent clients struggle with. So you've got things like, let's just talk about sensory overload. So if you're thinking about where we're doing our training classes, I know we can't always help that, but if the sensory overload could include things like noise, lights, touch, smell, those kind of things. So if you're thinking about a noisy dog training environment where the dogs are barking and things, lights, really bright lights, right down to the treats that we are using. And obviously, as dog trainers, we sometimes need to use smelly treats because that's what motivates a dog. However, if your neurodivergent client can't cope with the touch or the smell even of the treat, then you've kind of got a little bit of a problem, because the dog needs high motivating treats, but the handler is really struggling to touch them, or the smell of them is overwhelming for them. So one of the things that we used to do when we was dog training is, we'd provide gloves and things, but even that can be a little bit kind of shining a spotlight on somebody. So when it comes to being inclusive, we don't want to be inclusive to the point of exclusive, like we're excluding someone. And that's what you have to be really, really careful
very
with. So
tricky.
just by giving someone a glove, you're like, oh, well, what's wrong with that person? Why do they need a glove? Why are they? So one of the things we used to do is we used to see if there was things that we could incorporate into our games. So using things like wooden spoons, we'd put the treats on the spoon, but we wouldn't just give that client one, we'd give everybody one, and we'd make it so everybody's doing this, and we'd do it kind of like we might change over the order in what training tasks we're doing. So we'd bring that to the forefront of the class. And then we'd say, oh, you may as well use it. If you want to carry on using your spoon, it's good practice. So then it wouldn't single out the person that needs to use a spoon because the dog is, they didn't want to touch the treat, basically. So that's just kind of one tiny little thing. You've got like cognitive load and things. So when you're talking about dog training in general, what I mean by that is try not to give too many instructions all at once, because as neurodivergent people, they struggle with that cognitive load and just remembering things. Now, if you think about verbal instructions, physical instructions, looking at what your dog's doing at the time, that's quite a lot just to take in. You've got things like the transitions. As neurodivergent people, we can struggle with transitions as well. So just going from one task to another. Now, if you think about how many transitions there is in a dog training class, just getting from the car, your dog from the car into the dog training venue, and then getting them to settle, then you're changing tasks all the time with everything else. So with the, cognitive load, with the, a regulation of emotions and nervous system regulations, is quite a lot of things already piling up then, on there.
Mm.
And even the RSD comes into it as well. So the language that we're using and how we're talking to our clients, like overheard somebody at a agility show the other day. There was a group talking and somebody said, oh, just still train with such and such. And they were like, oh yeah, we train with those. And they're like, does she still shout at you? And like, they were like, oh yeah, we get shouted at still, and they were like laughing and joking at it. Fair enough. But for some people, that would make me, if I got shouted at in a training class, I'd probably want to run to the car and cry. Do you know what I mean? It'd be like, oh my God, what
I,
is,
I,
and that's just because I am sensitive and I do take things to heart and, this RSD and stuff.
same.
So I think there's so much that we can look at, the layout of our classes, how we're delivering it, that how we communicate as well. So one of the really important things to mention is the fact that we need communication. So we need information, usually in 2 or more forms. So if we're just standing at the front of a class and talking to our clients, that might not be enough. So when I was doing group classes, I did it by accident. Now it's crazy when I'm looking back on it, because I'm like, oh, we did all of this thing just because that's what I would have needed, but I didn't label it as neurodivergent because I didn't know. So we'd have like a whiteboard where we'd have like drawn instructions, we'd draw things on, we'd have the written things as well. I'd have a demo with my own dog so I could show them, and I'd be talking about it as well, and also providing them with like a written handout. which is a lot of work. I get it that, however, what I always come back to is we want the dogs to succeed that we're looking after. So, and the way that we're going to get them to succeed is by giving the owners, the handlers, the guardians, whatever you want to call them, what they need. Because we talk so much about how dogs pick up on our emotions and those kind of things. But if we're not looking after the human end of the lead and making it so they feel seen, safe and supported, the dogs pick up on how the
Mm.
handler's feeling, and they're not going to get the training that they need because the handler's overwhelmed or has got so much going on. So yeah, so just looking at giving
Mm.
their service as an overhaul really, and maybe getting as much information as possible coming into, maybe my community or whatever, the free community I have on Facebook, and getting as much information as possible because no two neurodivergent people are going to be the same. So yeah.
Brilliant. No, it's good. And I'll get you to send me all your
Yeah.
links so I can put them in the show
Thank
notes, but we'll mention them in a moment. So it's funny because I hadn't experienced imposter syndrome until I became a dog
you.
trainer in all my corporate career. So I come from a business background, as you
Mhm.
know, corporate business bank, and that's what I bring into my business mentoring. Actually, before I say that, I had another thing I just wanted to
Mhm.
mention. So when I do work with my business mentoring
Mhm.
clients, I have now been working with some neurodivergent people. So that was new to me. And I was like, oh God, like I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know, well, I just didn't know what to do. So I just asked him, like, how do you like to work? Do you like your task breaking down into bite-sized chunks
Mhm.
to avoid overwhelm? So I just think it's important to speak to like the
Yeah.
client, whoever you work with, to ask them how they work.
Yeah, I think as well,
So
asking them in a discreet way as well is really because we struggle with confrontation. If somebody asks me something on the spot, I may feel embarrassed or I may be like, oh, I don't really want to admit that. Things like booking forms or even sending them a message or, one of the things with a lot of dog behaviorists, they need some kind of they need the clients to collate information, don't they? It usually tends to be in the form of like a paper report. But for some neurodivergent people, that is just so overwhelming. So maybe looking at how they communicate with their clients, so how they give their information to their clients, but how also their clients can give information to them. So instead of just saying, fill this report
mm,
in, asking them, in a discreet way, whether it's a tick box on a form or a message, or some people will be happy just to discuss it, verbally, but some won't. And just at saying, would this work for you? Would a paper log be relevant? Would that work for you? Or would it be better to send me voice notes or little videos and those kind of things? And I know, yes, it's going to be more work. However, you're going to get the information you need because if you overwhelm them with lots of paper, they're not going to do it. And so next time you go to the appointment, they'll be like, you won't get any information about the dog because it's so overwhelming. They just haven't done it. So I think it's important to try and tweak things because you want the best for the dog. They're paying you for a service. It's up to us really to kind of accommodate their needs so we can help so everybody succeeds basically.
yeah, that's so important. It's like when we say work with a dog in front of us, we've got to work with a human in front of
Definitely.
us as well,
Definitely.
and be
Yeah.
adaptable. Yeah, so going back to my other
Mhm.
point, being in corporate career, I hadn't experienced imposter syndrome. I don't know if that was because you're trained to a certain
Okay.
level. There's industry internal qualifications that I was in banking, but then I became a dog trainer and suffered with imposter syndrome. And I think to a degree that's why I don't do as much dog training anymore. I only do it for existing
Mhm.
clients. But until I became a dog professional, suffering with imposter syndrome, burnout, overwhelm, boundaries, compassion
Mhm.
fatigue, why do you think we as pet professionals experience all those different types of emotions?
I think because a bit of a controversial answer. I think because as dog trainers and dog professionals, sometimes we can be a little bit opinionated of, we're all very passionate people and we're all very, we
Mm,
all have our own knowledge and things to bring to the table. But I think sometimes we can be quite opinionated of going back to the kind of the clicky thing. Oh, I've done, you need to
mm,
do this course, or you need to be a level 6 to do this, or you need to do that. And again, it's about opinions really. And I think it's that. I think there's a lot of pressure on dog trainers to do what other dog trainers want them to do. And it's like I say, it's one of the bugbears of mine, because you're never going to please everybody. Even if you do all of the courses, there's going to be someone else that comes along and says, "Oh, you've not done this one, you're not good enough." And I think if we're neurodivergent or a little bit more sensitive or anxious or suffering from imposter syndrome, that's going to hit a lot harder, because we're wanting to fit in. I think we're all just wanting acceptance, and we're wanting to be part of something. And we tend to think, unfortunately, that when we come into the dog world, we're all just this one big happy family. And unfortunately, there can be little divides. So yeah, I think it's the pressure that other professionals put onto other people. I think that's why we feel it most. And it's really important to remember, as dog trainers, as dog professionals, the only people we need to help, really, or opinions we need to be bothered about, qualifications, is to do the work that we actually do. So if you are qualified, and again, qualified, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because for some neurodivergent people, it might not, the academic side of it might not be as accessible, but they might have a lot of practical experience and actually hands-on experience. So again, it depends on people's views. I'm not saying don't be qualified. That's definitely not what I'm saying. You definitely do need some kind of CPD and keeping up with those kind of things. But when it comes to actual imposter syndrome and trying to keep up with things and I think we spend a lot of time trying to please other dog trainers and other dog professionals, when the only people we should be pleasing is our clients. If we got the skills and experience and knowledge to help our clients, really. I think that's my take on it. A little bit controversial.
No, I love a bit of controversial because what is it? Controversial. I can't bloody
Yes,
say
I know what
that.
you mean.
I love it because I'm a bit of a rebel. So no, that makes. I just wondered what your stance on it was. So Katrina, as we start to wrap up, if a neurodivergent pet professional is listening right now, they're feeling overwhelmed, misunderstood, or like they're doing business wrong in inverted commas, what would you want them to hear? And what small permission or reassurance would you love them to give themselves today, please?
So I think for me, if you're feeling overwhelmed, it doesn't mean that you're failing. I think that's really important. It's just your nervous system needs a bit of a reset. It's just overloaded. So I think it's just giving yourself permission to step back a little bit, giving yourself permission to actually tune back into your values and why you're doing the job you're doing, what you want out of the job that you are doing, and actually tuning back into yourself, really, because everything starts with you. You need to make sure that you are doing the things that make your heart happy, basically, so then you can go and help other people. So I think it's that, and because nobody is the same as somebody else. I think you do have permission to work differently. We see a lot of it online, and it's really important to mention a lot of the marketing, a lot of the strategies and things that we see do tend to be aimed at neurotypical people. So, you need to do this, you need to be hitting so many figures a month, or, you need to be, I don't know, doing this certain strategy for your business to work. I think there is so many ways to make a business work. It is okay. So you do have permission to do things differently, because if you're trying to fit into somebody else's mold, so to speak, that's when you're going to get burnt out and overwhelmed. And you might just need to be a little bit flexible in how you do things in order to be your best self, basically. So it is okay to rest without, earning any money. It's okay to manage your diary, that you can have one client and then you can have 2 hours off if needed. You don't have to do everything the way that other people do things, because what works for them probably won't work for you. And we've all got different things going off in our lives, and we've all, we may have partners, our own animals, families, elderly parents we need to care for. That's the beauty of being self-employed. A lot of us are self-employed. We can mold our business around us, but just because we are self-employed, we can't, it doesn't mean that we're going to have the same business as the next person. So by you doing less, you may actually be more productive and have a better business, but you're working far less than other people. So basically just permission to work differently, permission to be yourself, permission to get support if you need it. And it's not about capacity, it's about capability, really. So that'd be my thoughts.
Not about capacity, it's about capability. I love that. And I often say they broke the mold when they made me.
That's it.
Yeah, who wants to fit the mold? Right, Katrina, if our listeners or viewers want to find out more about you or get in touch, how can they do so,
So
please?
the easiest way is to head over to my website, which is dogsanddivergentminds.com. And I'm also on the social on Facebook and Instagram as the Neurodivergent Dog Coach. And you're more than welcome to come into my free community as well, which is a safe space of other professionals that probably are feeling exactly like you are. So the best ways.
And you're also on LinkedIn. You're on LinkedIn as
Oh,
well
yeah,
now.
yes. I won't admit that I know what I'm doing, but I am over there as well.
Right, so we will get all the links in the show notes. Katrina Bayliss, thank you so much for joining me on the Pet Business Wellbeing podcast. I've loved chatting to you today.
No, thank you for having me. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Pet Business Wellbeing podcast. If you enjoyed today's chat, I'd love it if you could share this with a friend. Subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. And please consider leaving me a review. It really helps us reach more pet professionals who need this kind of support. Until next time, take care of yourself, look after your well-being, and remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about building a business you actually enjoy being in. Bye for now.